Well, hello, everyone. On behalf of the Volusia Water Alliance, welcome to the second installment of our virtual symposium series, The Right to Clean Water Movement. Usually we hold our annual symposium at the Sanborn Center in DeLand each fall, and we greatly look forward to resuming that when that's possible. In the meantime, we're being resilient and using the webinar format. We will hear from our speakers in turn and open it up to Q&A with a panel discussion at the end. And please hold your questions until the end. And you can type your questions in at the bottom of the page where it says Q&A. You will also find more detailed bios of our speakers and a recording of this webinar at our website, volusiawater.org. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We have an esteemed panel here to talk about a fascinating topic, the rights of nature and the right to clean water movement. Everyone should have the right to clean water, clean air, and healthy ecosystems. That's simple and logical. The realization, however, is a bit more complicated. Our panel will be discussing ways to recognize and legally enforce the rights of nature and the rights to communities to a healthy environment. However polarized our current political situation, one thing proves enduringly nonpartisan: clean, drinkable water. Our first speaker tonight is Chuck O'Neill. Chuck has a long history of being a champion of Florida's environmental causes. As former first vice president of the League of Women Voters of Florida, he led the league's participation in Florida's Water and Land Legacy Constitutional Amendment campaign. In addition to preventing Florida's black bear hunts, Chuck has fought to protect Florida's springs and aquifers from all sources of pollution. He is currently a finalist in the Orlando Sentinel Central Floridian of the Year 2020. Most recently, he became chairman of the Right to Clean Water Political Committee, whose charter amendment passed in Orange County with a bipartisan popular vote of over 89%. That made Orange County, Florida, the largest municipality in the United States to pass a Rights of Nature initiative. Chuck will share his journey and knowledge of the international, national, state, county, and citywide Rights of Nature, Right to Clean Water movement with us this evening. Chuck.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you so much to the Volusia Water Alliance for allowing Jim and I to speak tonight. And it's also great to see Clay and Kelly on for this very important topic. As Nancy said, this past November 3rd, Charter Amendment 1, the right to clean water, passed with over 89% of the vote. That happened in one of, let's say probably the most partisan election of my lifetime, for sure. So what is it about, and how did we get here to this point, and where are we going from this point forward? The problem, that this particular charter amendment is designed to address is largely a problem that plagues all of Florida, which is eutrophication. The eutrophication of our waterways leads to massive fish kills, marine mammal die-offs, cyanobacteria proliferating in our lakes, lagoons, and bays. And what does that mean to us economically? Economically, it is causing a loss of tourism, which pays a lot of our bills in Florida. The reason why we don't have a state income tax is because we derive so much money from sales tax, from tourists, from hotel tax, et cetera. So if there are no tourists, and I know some of you out there may say, yay, no tourism. But if our tourism industry dies, then it's going to become very, very expensive to live in Florida. Additionally, we have a legislature that seems to be intent on not preventing pollution. They pass regulatory laws every year, but the water just keeps getting worse and worse. So there are two competing problems here. We have a problem, and then we have a system, a regulatory system that's controlled by a legislature and a governor that are that see other priorities above clean water. To date, over 23,000 permits to pollute have been issued under our environmental regulatory system. Over half of the state's wetlands have been destroyed and plowed under and paved over with development. And over half of our state's waterways are classified as impaired, which means they're polluted to the point that they cause harm to life, not just life in the waterway itself, but life, human life, who swim in and consume the water. So how do we work around a state government and a regulatory apparatus that fails to protect our environment? This journey to rights of nature began for me back in 2013 when I was invited to a seminar put on by the Center for Earth Jurisprudence and Sister Pat Seaman. There were about 25 of us gathered around, and this is where I first heard Thomas Lindsay and Mari Margill talk about the rights of nature movement and what rights of nature was all about. So after the great polluting event of 2018, when we had just a massive amount of fish kills, we had red tide all around the state. We had cyanobacteria in our lakes and in the Indian River Lagoon. I said, I thought to myself, we've got to do something, and we got to do something out of the ordinary. We have to do something extraordinary here. I invited Thomas and Mari to come to Florida, to actually come to my living room and present to them what was a concept that I had heard years before in 2013. And I'm not sure if Steve, if you're advancing the presentation or I'm supposed to advance it myself, but in 2013, in April of 2013, the Thomas and Mari from the Center for Democratic and Environmental Rights came to my house and invited about 25 people from around the state to come over and hear them speak. When they did, the people from Florida here were very impressed. And also we had a hard time processing exactly what it was that they were telling us. So what they were telling us was that when the Constitution was drafted initially, the U.S. Constitution basically divides everything into either people or property. And if you're a person, then you have rights. If you're property, then you have no rights. The persons have rights over the property. And when this was initially presented, when our Constitution was presented, the persons under the Constitution was less than 10% of the population. Because of that, over the years, the definition of persons has expanded. So it's no longer just white landowning individuals, men. It is extended to people of color. It has extended into women. And so there has been this natural progression to extend what persons are under the Constitution. In the 1800s, persons became corporations. Corporations became persons, and that was largely through the railroads, pushing for that. So if you look in the Florida statutes right now, Section 101, what is a person in the state of Florida? A person in the state of Florida is not only a human individual, but it's also a corporation, an LLC, an LLP. Associations can be people. So this element that it's preposterous that nature could have rights. We have given rights to so many things that are non-human people. Thomas also talked about our regulatory process. Our regulatory process was set up not to specifically to stop pollution. It was set up to slow the decline or regulate basically the decline of the destruction of our natural world. And that's basically what our regulatory process does now. It is designed to regulate for instance, the amount of wetlands that are destroyed and paved under. It is designed to regulate the amount of toxins that are put into our water. Uh, this is what our regulatory process is. It regulates the destruction. But how do we stop the destruction? What is it? How is it possible that we, the citizens of Florida, could stop the destruction? And in order to do that, we would have to have the right to bring an action against a polluter. And if a polluter was to face a lawsuit from individuals and say, hey, look, you've got to stop polluting our water, and bring an action from a citizen to do that. But under our legal system, you have to have standing. So under our current legal system, you have to either be financially or physically impacted by that pollution. Otherwise, you don't have standing in court to bring an action. Now, this kind of situation was borne out in the early 70s in a case called Sierra Club versus Morton. And what happened in Sierra Club versus Morton, there was an idea to sell off a part of the Sequoia National Forest to a developer, which is Morton, who was going to develop a ski lodge for Disney. And the Sierra Club sued Morton to try and stop this destruction of the Sequoia National Forest. And in a close decision, the Sierra Club was ruled to not have standing. And Sierra Club was stopped from pursuing this suit in defense of the Sequoia National Forest. And Justice William O. Douglas wrote a dissenting opinion. I'd like to read it to you. The critical question of standing would be simplified and also put neatly in focus if we fashioned a federal rule that allowed an environmental issues to be litigated before federal agencies or federal courts in the name of the inanimate object about to be despoiled, defaced, or invaded by roads and bulldozers, where injury is the subject of public outrage. Contemporary public concern for protecting nature's ecological equilibrium should lead to a conferral of standing upon environmental objects to sue for their own preservation. This suit would therefore be more properly labeled as Mineral King versus Morton. So this is where we get to the term rights of nature, where we are trying to impart, to deliver rights, certain rights, not human rights, but natural rights to things like rivers and lakes and streams in Florida. After this event in April of 2019, we got together in different groups around the state to try and push charter amendments in the 20 charter counties in Florida. There's 67 counties in Florida, 20 of which are charter counties. And what is a charter county? A charter county has a charter which is like a constitution for the county. And individuals can bring a charter amendment to the voters one of three ways. The first way to do that is through petition. And generally, you have to collect between 7 and 10% of the voters in the last general election have to sign a physical form to put something on the ballot. So that's the first method. The second method is by county commission vote. So your county commission, for instance, in Volusia County, could vote by majority to put a rights of nature initiative on the ballot that you would vote on in the next general election, which would likely be 2022. The third way is through a charter review commission, in which each commissioner designates certain people to form a commission to review the charter and propose amendments to the populace at the general election. So what we did here in Orange is we went the third route through the Charter Review Commission. And in June of 2019, I proposed a rights of nature charter amendment to the Charter Review Commission, a 15-member commission. They agreed to create a subcommittee, and that subcommittee was comprised of 3 attorneys, a retired NASA engineer, and a UCF biology professor. And that 5-person committee met for 11 meetings over 7 months and brought back to the Charter Review Commission the wording for a proposed charter amendment. That wording had to be voted on in March of 2020 for the second time for it to be passed. And what you see on the screen right now, this is the nitrate level in either the Wekiva or the Econ River. That orange line at the bottom is the highest maximum amount of nitrogen concentration before you start creating permanent damage to the life forms in the river. And you can see it has never been at that level or lower going back almost 10 years. So here we have, fast forward March of 2020, the Charter Review Commission passes this amendment and puts it on the ballot in Orange County. And what happens from that point on is we conduct a campaign, just like you would campaign to run for office. And this campaign was called the Right to Clean Water campaign. And that Right to Clean Water campaign, we campaigned mostly through digital means over the course of this period of time. And it came down to November, and the voters of Orange County were faced with how to vote on this particular amendment. And we call it the Right to Clean Water Amendment because, Steve, if you could advance it a few frames to the amendment. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Yeah, keep going. There's the Charter Review Commission. All right. There's a bunch of happy people after pass. Okay, right there, Steve. And you can pinch this out to read more closely what it was about. But what the charter amendment did down in section C, it says the Wekiva River and Econ-Lockhatchee River, portions of which are within the boundaries of Orange County, and all other waters within the boundary of Orange County, have a right to exist, flow, to be protected against pollution, and to maintain a healthy ecosystem. Now that's more or less the first part of the charter amendment. And if you go to the next page, Steve, up at the top, it says in section 2, all citizens of Orange County have a right to clean water by having the waters of Orange County protected against pollution. So what we have in the Orange County Right to Clean Water Amendment are 2 parts. The first part being a rights of nature provision that give natural rights to not only the Wekiva and Econ River, but all waters that are within the boundary of Orange County, and to give them 4 rights: the right to exist, the right to flow by definition as is defined in state statute, the right to be protected against pollution, and the right to maintain a healthy ecosystem. So when you give an entity those rights, then how do you enforce those rights? Well, in page 2, in the violations, section C, it says it shall be unlawful and a violation of this section of the charter for any governmental agency, non-natural person, or corporate entity to intentionally or negligently pollute the Wekiva River, the Econ River, within the boundaries of Orange County, or any other waters within the boundaries of Orange County. So here's a two-step process. You give the rivers the rights to be protected against pollution. You give the citizens of the county the right to clean water by having those waters protected. And then you have polluting entities. So those polluting entities are violating not only the rights of the river, of the waters, but they're also violating the rights of the citizens that are well-founded in the public trust doctrine that these waters are to be protected for the citizens of the United States. And in this case in particular. So if someone's found in violation, the remedies are injunctive relief, that they have to stop the polluting, or also that they have to take the river back to the level of pollution before they began it. So those are basically the creation of the rights and creation of the violation of the rights, and how you address returning those waters back to the condition they were before the pollution occurred. And I know we're going to talk about preemption and be glad to get into that and talk to Clay and Kelly about that issue. One thing that you have to know is, you're doing something right when the legislature creates a law specifically to stop you from doing what will protect the waters of Florida. So we're looking forward to that discussion. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you the illustrious Jim Durocher, who not only is the East Central Florida director for the Florida Rights of Nature Network, he is also who we call the voice. So whenever we do a public service announcement, we use Jim, and you'll be blessed to hear his voice instead of mine for the next 8 minutes. Jim?
Jim, can you hear me? Unmute, please.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. Thanks, Chuck. And I want to thank the Volusia Water Alliance for all the work and the programs that you guys have put on through the years. I've really enjoyed them. And we really appreciate this opportunity to share something we feel is the next logical step to protecting our shared environment, rights of nature. When you go back in your individual ancestry, we have an intuitive knowledge that we are connected and dependent on nature. You might feel this when you're standing under a tree or in a forest or on the lake or maybe in your garden. We all have that when we go back to our ancestry. Steve, if you could show the one. This isn't what people think of when they think of Florida. They dream of clean white beaches, clean water to swim in, and sea life all around. Here in Orange County, we have a chance to change all that. The Right to Clean Water Charter Amendment would stop pollution at the source. Healthy waters mean healthy families and good-paying jobs. Vote yes on Charter Question 1 by November 3rd.
Paid political advertisement by the Right to Clean Water Political Committee.
Thanks, Steve. Following Orange County's lead, we need to add more counties and cities who want a right to clean water. The Federal Clean Water Act does not grant clean water. It regulates how much pollution can be in it, and that can be a lot. Regulations may be the reason we have ecosystems still able to be saved, but they have proved over and over again to not be enough. This is a picture I took of Chuck adding some sweat equity, putting up signs by the Wekiva River for the November election. And the next picture is a picture that the foreman took, and it was about 90 degrees that day. And but we got some of these signs out, built them and put them up, and got some really good advertising. So Steve, if you want to just go to any common picture now, it'll be a while before I need the third one. Or you can put it up, that's fine too. Thanks. So as the FRON East Central Regional Director, my area besides Volusia covers Indian River County, Lake, Marion, Orange, Seminole, and Brevard counties. If anyone has contacts with public officials or interested parties in any of those areas, please share those with us. My email and phone I'll put down in the chat. And you can also reach us by going to fron.org, and you can reach any of the state directors on that and send out any pertinent information on that and some contact numbers and names. That'd be great. We have two efforts ongoing currently in Brevard County, the city of Cocoa and the city of Satellite Beach. These cities lie on the Indian River and the Banana River, which are both part of the Indian River Lagoon system. 156-mile estuary, which runs all the way north through Volusia and south through Indian River, St. Lucie, and Martin County. The Indian River Lagoon has had severe water quality issues and algae blooms in recent years, which has caused massive loss of seagrass, huge fish kills, one you saw a picture in Chuck's presentation, large numbers of bird deaths, and marine mammal die-offs, which you also saw, unfortunately, in Chuck's presentation. Let's talk about Volusia County a little bit. We are communicating with the city of New Smyrna Beach and hoping the new ordinance we supplied and that bypasses the state preemption will be discussed by the city commission there. I have made contact with 3 Volusia County council members, and I am waiting more replies and opportunities to discuss the right to clean water initiatives with them. Since the next Charter Review Commission in Volusia won't happen until 2025, those 3 ways of getting it accomplished we're down to 2. So we're going to have to either get the county commission to either create an ordinance, which we can supply to them, and vote that in, or they're going to have to vote to put it on the ballot in 2022. Or we're going to have to go with the ballot initiative and get thousands of signatures to actually put it on the ballot. The way that we were successful in Orange County won't work until 2025 for Volusia County. And I'm hoping we don't have to wait that long. So we need more caring participants in Volusia and throughout Florida to, 1, learn more about the rights of nature movement. 2, lead and form groups to promote the right to clean water. And 3, to contact city and county officials. So how do you get started? Well, we have an abundance of educational resources available that can take you from concerned citizen to the right to clean water, rights of nature warrior. There are articles, videos, webinars. We have ongoing Zoom meetings, and we have mentoring from local, state, and international leaders. So you will not be doing this alone. We'll have help along the way. I personally see two very definitive benefits to humankind recognizing rights of nature. The first one is returning to a living earth with evolving and thriving ecosystems. And because of this, healthier Volusia citizens with more recreational opportunities. Now you'll get a chance to ask some questions of the panel at the end, but I've got some questions that I'd like you to ponder for a moment. Who really wants to kayak in a polluted river? Do you want to eat fish from a clean St. Johns River or Mosquito Lagoon? Or is it a polluted water body acceptable? If a fish lives in a polluted lake, river, or estuary, isn't it contaminated and possibly unsafe to eat? Doesn't a fish have the right, along with manatees, dolphins, and all the creatures, to actually live in a healthy ecosystem? Don't we all have that right? When I look at this, now this picture, if you look at it, when I look at Volusia County on a map, we look like a gerrymandered island. More correctly, the county is actually shaped by water. We are literally surrounded by fresh, brackish, or salt water. I'll try to prove this to you. On our eastern coast is the Atlantic Ocean, and it stretches west all the way to the St. Johns River. Our south is hemmed in by the Indian River, Lake Harney, and Lake Monroe. On the north, Volusia is bordered by the Halifax River, Crescent Lake, Lake Diston, and Big Lake George. And under our feet even is the Floridan Aquifer, where we get all of our drinking water. Checkmate. In fact, we are mostly water, 60 to 70%. So how much pollution would you accept in your personal water? Granting legally recognized rights to nature is the cutting edge of environmental protection and law. It changes the legal ground upon which environmental battles are fought. If nature doesn't have rights, it can't be protected adequately against corporations that do. Rights of nature laws compel us to live sustainably within nature's laws and limitations. They restore our relationship to the natural world. We are talking about water this evening, but also life. It only makes sense to try to make all water clean, whether we drink it, eat from it, look at it, or play in it. Right to clean water laws can be a useful tool to limit out of control development, maintain sustainable ecosystems, improve our health, and secure a living world. Join us. Thank you. And
Thank you.
back to you, Nancy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chuck, and thank you very much, Jim. Those were wonderful presentations. Next up, we welcome Clay Henderson. Over a long career as an environmental lawyer, Clay has been a zealous defender of Florida's special places. He sponsored or co-authored most of the natural resources protection provisions in the Florida Constitution, including Amendment 1, the largest voter-approved conservation funding initiative in our nation's history. He led the development of nationally recognized land conservation programs, including Florida Forever and Volusia Forever, which was just renewed by our voters for another 20 years. He has received numerous awards recognizing his commitment to public service and the environment. Clay will now discuss the question, how can the Volusia County Charter and the environmental minimum standards be used to accomplish the goals of the rights of nature, rights to clean water movement in Volusia County? Clay.
Thank you, Nancy. Is the audio working? Can you hear me? Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's a good start. And because I can see the screen, I guess what we can't see are the folks that are out there. I recognize some names, and a shout out to my successor at the Institute, Jason Evans. I see him out there, and a lot of other folks that we participated with over the years, and salute Steve and the league and the Water Alliance for continuing to keep these dialogues going, these great informational sessions, even in this strange time of COVID and Zoom. So glad that we're still being able to go forward. We're going to get a little bit of a civics lesson here. Chuck started it out, and I want to, it's been fun working with Chuck over a lot of years. He's a person with a lot of enthusiasm and knows how to get things done, and salute Chuck and Jim for their efforts here to push this. You know, I support the goal. I may be the most conservative person on the panel here, and as we talk about this, you'll see some of the problems that we're all up against. I say that because everything that Jim and Chuck have said about the state of our water is accurate. The current system that we have is not fulfilling the promise of the Clean Water Act, that our waters would be both swimmable and fishable by 1990, and clearly that didn't happen, and we've been going downhill ever since. But it's time to step up the game here and talk about how we can do some things that are just a little bit different. So, Steve, let's go ahead and advance it. Chuck talked a little bit about the Constitution, and I got a kind of a starting point, because you know, this whole idea of protection of water and environmental law, these are all very new concepts. When I was in college and law school, these were just starting. There was really no jurisprudence. Things were just starting out. But the Constitution, of course, was a document that was written in the 18th century. And so we're still guided by that, and in some respects that we are shackled by it. So obviously there was no mention of environment or natural resources in the Constitution. In fact, you know, in the late 1700s and through most of the 19th century, most Americans in the world, you know, looked upon natural resources as totally unlimited in America, and that's what led to so much of our decline. The conservation movement didn't get started until people were able to actually see that decline, and species began to become extinct. But what is in this document, and it's a guardrail out there. It's a fundamental guardrail that we all just have to understand, is that what the Constitution does is protect property rights. That's what it's there for. And you think about it in the context of how it came together, and what voters looked like at that time and why that was important. That's what it does. It protects property rights. It is a fundamental right. And this same language that's out of the Fifth Amendment is basically in the Florida Constitution as well. I would point out that most people might not appreciate that the largest democratic republic in the world is not the United States. It's actually the country of India. And they have a more modern constitution that was adopted about the time that they achieved their independence. They have the same words: no person shall be deprived his life, liberty, or property. The difference is they actually interpret life very much the way that Chuck and Jim talk about it. That what if you don't have clean air and clean water? Well, what's life? And so they look at it from a different lens. And so I think this is what's good about this discussion, if you start thinking about how to look at this a different way. Steve, let's go to the next one. So this will be real quick, but I want to give you some examples that while there's nothing in the United States Constitution, we have 50 separate states, and each has its own constitution. And states are allowed to provide rights that the Federal Bill of Rights does not. I mean, a good example in Florida, for instance, is that we have a very expressive right to privacy in Florida, and it's in our Constitution. We all assume we have a right to privacy, but it's guaranteed to us in the Florida Constitution. It's not guaranteed to us in the United States Constitution. The Supreme Court has has expanded that in some respects, but I just use that as an example. But there are several states that have placed in their constitution a fundamental right for a clean environment. And I've just got a couple of examples here. One of my personal favorites, I didn't spell it out here, is Rhode Island. You know, you have a right to fish. And you know, what good is a right to fish if it's not clean water? So again, you know, I think if you put a right to fish in the Florida Constitution, you might get a 95% support for that. Hawaii, a right to a clean and healthy environment. Illinois, just a right to a healthful environment. Both looking at it from the perspective of if you don't have a clean environment, it's probably going to be unhealthy. Next page, Steve. A few others here. Montana, all people are born with free and certain inalienable rights, including the right to a clean and healthful environment. You know, and that's we can now see that as fundamental. Massachusetts, same language, right to clean air and water, freedom from excessive unnecessary noise. Not so sure about how that's working up here, but it's in there. Pennsylvania, the same thing. So these are examples of how other states have addressed this issue. In this conversation that I think we need to continue to have in Florida. Next page, we'll come back to Florida and start to put it, Steve, there we go. So this Article 2, Section 7, I have no pride of authorship in this language, although many of these words are mine, but a political process is a process of compromise. So this is the best that I could get under the circumstances, but it's a policy and about adequate provision to protect our resources. But obviously, we could argue about what is adequate. I don't think our panel would agree that adequate provision is being made for this. But when you have standards like that, it's hard to make that case in court under this current language. What we're talking a lot about, though, today is something I pulled out here, which is Article 8 in local government. As Chuck says, we have about 20 counties in Florida that have adopted a charter form of government, which means that they can pass ordinances in their county that, if approved by the voters in that county, can extend rights or develop programs or place limitations on their government or change the form of government in certain ways. And they can do it by vote of the people. There are many examples of that in this county. I think the best example that most people would recognize is the beach. The beach is under county control. There's one beach code. There are a number of environmental provisions in that code. There's the always, how shall we say, controversial issue of beach driving, but that's an example of how charter can change the way that things happen within a community. Through a charter, you can also declare whose law governs. So we have 16 municipalities in Volusia County. How do you say if you're going to have a county standard, whose standard prevails? And so in some cases, in other, in some places, the toughest one would apply, and others it may not. But you can define all those things through a charter, and we can do it in Volusia County. I want to put a finer point on something Chuck said, because all counties are a little bit different. In Volusia, the ways to amend the charter are through the Charter Review Commission, which meets every 10 years and has already met, by a supermajority vote of the county council. We have a 7-member body here, which is different than most counties. Most counties have a 5-member board. It takes us 2/3 vote to get something on the ballot, or in the case of initiative, it's 5% of the voters, and it has to be 5% in each of the 5 county council districts. So that's just a little bit different. Next slide, Steve. So we have a couple of provisions I just want to point out. And this dates from the original charter in 1970. And by the way, I guess this last year we're celebrating 50 years. Volusia was the first home rule charter developed after the 1968 Constitution came into effect. There were 2 other local governments, Miami and Jacksonville, that were grandfathered in, but Volusia was the first county after the 68 Constitution to undergo this. And so from the beginning, there's been a power that's been stated to the county council to be able to act to prevent pollution and to protect the environment. And so this was sort of ahead of its game. When you figure this was done in 1970, about the same time that, or actually before the Clean Water Act was passed. So, so a little bit ahead of the game. But the county was slow to undertake ordinances under this provision because about the same time, the state and federal government were taking off and passing the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, National Environmental Protection Act, Endangered Species Act, and all the local, or excuse me, the state laws that followed. So the county did not really jump into the business of passing ordinances at that time. Next slide, Steve. So what happened and what is different is that in 1986, the Charter Review Commission came forward with a recommendation to give the county council the authority to pass minimum standards for the protection of the environment. And you'll see the list of the things that have been set out that the county would have the authority to do: trees, aquifer, stormwater, wastewater management, river and waterway protection, hazardous waste disposal, wetlands, beach and dune protection, and pollution. So the idea was that the county could pass an ordinance that would have a countywide effect. A city would have to enact a standard that was at least that's as strong, but for some of these city or some of these provisions, cities actually wanted to go further for their own reasons. Tree ordinances are an example of that. So this is there. Let's talk a little bit about what this is done. Next slide, Steve. So on the left, I've called out those issue areas that I just listed that are from the charter amendment, and then you can see what has been adopted. I noticed in putting this slide together that I guess it's true. I'm getting old and not remembering all this, but most of these were passed when I was on the council. But as you can see, that was 35 years ago. So, so there have been some things that have been done since, but there's some things that are still stuck, from where they were in the 80s. And there have been some interesting things there. I think that we were ahead of the Water Management District on water conservation. In fact, we got so far out ahead of them, the Water Management District told us that we were preempted, and we said, "Oh, you really want us to have people conserve less?" And so they backed off. But we did get out ahead. We got out ahead on Indian River Lagoon standards, but we ran into the problem that at least one of the cities just refused to do anything about it. So that was an issue. We were ahead of the game on the fertilizer ordinance as well. And we used this to adopt protection for sea turtles with lighting standards all up and down the beach. So you can see there's some things that have been done well, but there are other things that we just didn't do. And so you really kind of look at river and waterway protection, for instance, and not much. and certainly not enough. Steve, let's go to the next slide. Just I kind of sort of thought about this from a 35,000 and 35 year looking back, and why it didn't work maybe the way it was intended. It really was, in some respects, the least common denominator approach. When you're dealing with 16 counties, you're balancing interests, you're balancing the differences between a Pearson and a Norman Beach. And so sometimes you err on the side of having a minimum standard. And then if the city wants to do something better, they could. In most cases, they did not. Second point I just sort of mentioned, which is that we didn't cover everything, and particularly in the area of water quality. Many of these, and I'll use the wetlands ordinance as an example. We passed that ordinance in 1989. It was ahead of its time, but other federal and state policies and water management district rules have overtaken that, and so that ordinance is pretty much frozen in time. As I mentioned, we just never really addressed the overall water quality problems. And there's really I've never seen it, no county oversight on how the cities have implemented any of these, and what the county would do to make a city enforce it or adopt it. So this has been an overall issue. And Steve, of course, would say many times, and I agree with him, the goal of almost all of our environmental policies is to try to educate people to do the right thing. But we all know that that's not been a uniform approach. All right, next slide. I'm trying to remember go. So I mean, we Chuck and Jim clearly brought this to everybody's attention, but it just, let's put an exclamation mark next to it. All of Volusia County's surface waters are impaired under the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. And if you look at that on a national basis, Florida is right up there at the top with the number of waterways that are deemed impaired. And when you consider that we don't have a lot of industry, that is putting, direct discharges of pollution into the waterways, you can begin to see, well, it's a problem that it's across the board. And so it really is going to require a new way of thinking to be able to look at this. And I must say, in my more recent experience in dealing with Indian River Lagoon issues and all the comments that we did under the Springs BMAPs, it's just not working. And we really do have to find a different approach to looking at this. Next slide, Steve. See where I'm at. So Chuck raised this, and I know we're going to talk more about this, but the problem that the rights of nature approach is going to take, at least in the early days here, is that the legislature has stepped in and said, you can't do it. And I don't disagree with Chuck in saying if you're doing something right, then the legislature comes in and tells you can't do it. That means you're probably doing something right. But they did. And so the reality is that, back to that constitutional provision on what a charter county can and cannot do, if the legislature steps in and says you can't do it, then that's the rule, unless we figure out for them to change that. A couple of years ago, as an example, I think it was Coral Gables passed a local ordinance that banned the sale of styrofoam cups, within the city, and court threw it out because it's preempted. You've got cases like that are out there, and so that's the answer that you're going to get from your city attorneys and county attorneys when you bring this forward. this is going to be an issue, and until it's litigated and decided, it's just going to be an issue that's out there. Next slide. One of the approaches that I've taken in looking at this issue over the last several years is just saying, shouldn't this be a right? Should it not be a fundamental right that we as citizens have to have clean air and clean water? And this is the only provision that I have found, and I don't know that it's been litigated, but it is an example of how it has been done, at least in the second largest county in the state. I would have framed it a little different way, but you see the approach that it gives to Broward County citizens a right to a sustainable environment, including clean air and clean water. So you still have the standing issue that Chuck addressed, and I'm sure we'll talk about, but at least it spells out that as a right, and I think that's a clear direction we need to be headed. Next slide. I wanted to share this with you because this is something that John Mills and I started in the CRC back 20 years ago, and then we brought this forward again to the last Constitution Revision Commission in 2018. There were, I think, 1,500 proposals that went before the CRC. There were about 20 or so that received review, and then a bunch of them went on the ballot. And don't get me started about a lot of those because they were crazy in the way they put them all together. But this was an issue that did get some attention and did not pass. But it frames the issue in a similar way, but puts it in the form of being right of citizens to clean air, clean water, and control of pollution. So I think you could draft something similar to this for a county charter amendment that would affect, it would give us that many more tools, the toolbox to deal with. So I think last slide, Steve. So, I alluded to this earlier, and Chuck alluded to it. I don't think you're going to get the county council to put anything like this, or right to nature, or right to a clean environment on the ballot. It's going to take some legwork, and in this county, it would take about 20,000 signatures. It'd have to be 5% in each county council district. Some might be a little harder than the others, but it could be done. I look at 20,000 signatures. We had to get 1 million signatures to get Amendment 1 on the ballot. And of course, we're still litigating what that means, but it took 1 million signatures to get on the ballot. So I think this thing that could be done. So anyway, I'll drop it at this point. I think Kelli I haven't seen her photo here, but I know she's out there, and I think coming up next. And then I look forward to the conversation between us on where we go from here.
Great. Thank you very much, Clay. Kelli is up next. And before I introduce her, I just wanted to remind everyone on the call that please put any questions you may have into the Q&A at the bottom. I know sometimes people use chat, but we're going to use Q&A for our questions here tonight. So, and then we'll be doing a Q&A and panel discussion just after Kelli finishes. And next up, we have Kelli McGee. An attorney and expert in natural resources conservation, Kelli has worked in support of the rights of nature with the Center for Earth's Jurisprudence and served Volusia County as Director of Growth and Resource Management, Director of Planning and Development Services, and Natural Resources Director. She is currently Executive Director of the Riverside Conservancy, a nonprofit that promotes living shoreline restoration and implementation. Kelli will recap and compare the global rights of nature movement with the state and local tools to protect and promote clean water. Kelli?
Thank you, Nancy. Can you hear me? All right, very good. Well, I'm going to start with a story. Once upon a time, there was an environmental lawyer who realized that she might have spent the last 3 decades tinkering along the edges of a rigged system. And it was thanks to a set of Catholic nuns that enlightened her through a local law school. And the local law school is Barry University Law School. And the entity is the Center for Earth Jurisprudence. So big shout out to those guys. They are really on the cutting edge. As Clay mentioned, it's an evolving field, right? Environmental law is, it's what we make of it. But I think that there is a definite sense of failure for many of us who have worked to promote clean water, to prevent pollution of the many, many sources and types. And it was, Sister Pat, which Chuck mentioned, and many, many others at CEJ that taught me a lot about the global movement of the rights of nature, right? They opened my eyes about, how do you think, how do you think about property? And, as Clay mentioned, property law has been, the Western view of property law has been, ingrained into us, this idea of ownership of property. And they explained to me, there's this whole other way of looking at the earth, right? Of seeing yourself as a part of nature, as opposed to sort of superior to it. And they taught me about drawing on indigenous wisdoms, right? Looking to people who have really worked in harmony with nature for thousands of years, and they sort of turned me on to a lot of different organizations that work on this issue. Some globally, we have the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, GARN. We have, the Earth Law Center, and there are these wonderful local groups like Jim Durocher is leading locally. And I think that, one of the things that's very common that we see in this movement is that there is a respect for the planet, a respect for the natural environment, and in many ways, there's almost a religious aspect to it, right? We are honoring and respecting the heritage of clean water and nature. And so it can really flip your thinking if you look at it from a different person's eyes. Now, we don't have time to go into all of the different aspects of the rights of nature, from Ecuador putting the rights of nature into their constitution and all of the challenges that all of the different nations have faced. But we can look at the movement, Earth jurisprudence. What is it, right? We think about environmental law, and I think it was it might have been Chuck who said, environmental law as it is today, we're permitting, right? We are environmental law permits pollution. That's, we're allowing this. We're saying we're going to issue enough permits to people to pollute the environment until it becomes too polluted, right? And then we've been spending decades debating, well, what's too polluted? What's impaired? Who's to blame? What are we going to do about it? And so Earth jurisprudence, the rights of nature movement, is critical of the standard sort of doctrine of environmental law. But it's also constructive because it brings to us philosophies and a way of thinking that can actually help us live in harmony with nature. I mentioned the permitting, how we permit pollution. Basically, the Clean Water Act basically said, a part of the Clean Water Act, that if there is pollution entering a waterway, waters of the United States from a pipe, you have to basically get a permit for it, right? And so that's the way the United States has proceeded. But, you know, there's a country out there that I think issued Clay Henderson a license to kill, right? I mean, so, and really that's just a fancy way of saying it's a fishing license, right? But we put all of these human-centered words and phrases onto the things that we're trying to protect. And really, if we look at the global movement on looking at indigenous cultures and learning from them, right? So it's more listening than talking. Nationally, we can revitalize the public trust doctrine, right? We can renew the idea of what do we think about community land trusts. And that brings me to the Riverside Conservancy. What we're doing locally is we are conserving lands, mostly living shoreline, which is our green infrastructure. It's those native natural buffers between land and water that can serve to filter pollution and be habitat for aquatic species. And so we look at all of these different tools in our toolbox, right? So we've mentioned amending the constitutions, you know, that may be our strongest position if we're going to be advocating for the rights of nature in the state of Florida. We can look at concepts like guardian ad litem, right? So if there are children who maybe don't have an adult to speak for them, we have people who will represent them in court. And I think what we're seeing are people stepping up and wanting to be the voice of in defense of nature and in defense of our ecosystems. Because, you know, part of this, I kind of joked, a rigged system, but people, we have rights, and our culture is sort of founded on that, but we've also given corporations rights. Okay, so a corporation, which is a non-living entity, has legal standing, but the Indian River Lagoon does not, right? Our springs do not. And when you talk about the precautionary principle, when you're tinkering around with an engine, the first rule is you want to save all the parts, right? So it might be a good idea for us to save all the parts and speak for these ecosystems as a whole. But finally, it's really just good business practice, okay, right? So coming full circle, I can continue to work within the confines of a system. And the way we do that is by having these kinds of conversations where we have people with different backgrounds and experiences and frames of reference, but we have to continue to push that envelope, right? This is an emerging field, and we want these tools that are going to be lasting. And I think that's, you know, what Clay was talking about was, here are some tools in the toolbox that we here in Volusia County have, right? We have these provisions where the county council could choose to reestablish the Environmental and Natural Resources Advisory Committee, NRAC, and to adopt new minimum standards. But it takes a lot, because with every new rule that we apply, there is a cost. And there are enforcement issues. So we have to be mindful of that. And by having multiple different approaches, we can potentially reduce the cost of that by having a lot of eyes in the environment. We can be more aware, and we can share this information. And I'm going to just end with 2 points, which is one of Clay's slides was the minimum standards. And I believe it was 2014, the county council adopted the fertilizer ordinance. We dealt with the issue of preemption then, because the state legislature said that only the state can make rules about the sale of fertilizer. And what that did is that means that local governments cannot put a ban on fertilizer, right? Fertilizer, we know the excess use of fertilizer, it drains down into our aquifer, into our groundwater, it runs off, it exacerbates natural algae blooms, and we're seeing this preponderance of harmful algae blooms, and so the county was preempted from banning the sale of fertilizer, right? That would have been the easiest thing in the rainy season when the rain falls, when there's a lot of rainfall and there's a lot of runoff. We can see a lot of these algae blooms happening. Well, because there was a state preemption, the county legal department crafted the minimum standard very, very carefully. And that was basically saying that people cannot apply fertilizer in the summer months, right? So a nuance, but it survived the challenges, and there were many challenges. And in fact, once it went in effect, we had partners coming out of the woodwork that we never thought we had once the county council actually voted it in. And we brought in people from other counties to give testimony to their success with fertilizer bans in the summertime. And so, thank you, Chuck, for coming and talking to us, because, we have to look at our neighbors and say, okay, well, what have they done? What have they done successfully? Well, even with the preemption, they've tapped into something that's fundamental, right? If people our connection with water, whether we're fishing or we're swimming or we're kayaking. Jim often says, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over, right? I think you have a t-shirt that says that. And it's true. I mean, but it's being done in a really positive way. It's people are taking the power and leading. So it's a grassroots movement, and that helps our elected officials, right? When they know what the people want, it helps them move in the right direction. And so, I saw in the comments, there were people talking about, who are we contacting? How do we contact them? What's the message? Well, I think this is probably a good time to open the discussion, because we might want to have that conversation.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. And if all our panelists would open up their mics, and we're going to toss it open to Q&A. And we have a couple of questions. So all the attendees, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box. And I will start with one of them. And again, I'll just toss them out. And Jim, your mic is still muted. If you could unmute, please. Thanks. Okay, so the first one we have is what are the state water district's positions on Florida rights of nature? Have you approached the water districts like St. John's, and what do they think?
That'd be a non-starter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nancy, I think at this point, because the water districts are in violation from the get-go of violating the right to flow, they continue to issue consumptive use permits. And I guess there's a contest that was put in place by Rick Scott, to get them out just as fast as they possibly can. So, we're all drinking out of the same aquifer, and they are issuing as many straws as wide as possible, as quickly as possible.
Okay, I've got another one here. Could an economic analysis, which proves that our economy has been impacted from eutrophication, be used as proof of standing for a class action lawsuit against fertilizer users?
Mm.
Clay?
I'm thinking about that one. You know, we've there are some economic studies out there. I mean, Kelly can probably help me think about the one for the Indian River Lagoon. I mean, it's showing, you know, a multi-billion-dollar economic impact for clean water and a diminishment of that value, you know, as a result of this pollution these last few years. It is the issue, and so you can do that at some level. You can make that argument, you can put it out there, but it doesn't help you when it gets to standing. The area where the legislature has probably been the most successful in keeping advocates out of the court is by limiting who can actually bring a challenge, and so generally speaking, the person bringing that challenge has to be able to demonstrate that the aggrieved action affects them, it's injurious to them personally, or in some way to a group of people that they represent. And there are different ways that they've done it. So standing remains an issue, and in anything, and I know that the Orange County provision addresses anything that you do here, you really need to try to address that issue of standing in your amendment.
Okay, and maybe a follow-up to that. If a complaint is lodged by a citizen regarding polluted waters, what is the formal process that needs to take place? Is that what you just said? They need to show that they've been injured?
Well, it's if they were either filing a lawsuit for damages or injunction, or if it was a challenge to a permit. In any of those situations, they would have to demonstrate their stake in the outcome.
Okay. This is a comment over in the chat area, and this was talking about ecotourism is surpassing theme parks. And this state started on ecotourism and water qualities, both of which are essential. Are any of you seeing that as being the case? I know, Jim, you've got you have an ecotourism background. Are you seeing that that's been the case numbers wise?
Well, everywhere I go to hike or kayak, or it's been more crowded for sure since the pandemic. People are safer outside and they want to get outside. So I don't know any numbers. I had a ecotourism business years ago, and I can tell you that one of the reasons that we sold the business was my partner said he just couldn't see another dead manatee floating in the water. And I felt the same way. The last year of our business in 2013, I came across 2 manatees 2 separate times, one each, with my clients. Just not a good way of trying to educate people and teach them about the environment.
Right.
So, but I think that's very possible, especially this past year in 2020.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think with COVID, we're seeing a real resurgence in appreciation for our natural spaces, right? So when we were all on lockdown and then they said, okay, you guys can go outside, but stay with your family. We saw a lot of families getting outside, getting back to nature, going on these trails, going on the water. Every weekend here on the Indian River Lagoon, it's packed. It's packed, and boat sales are skyrocketing. And we know this. I mean, Boston Whaler has been working on a 24/7 schedule down here, in Edgewater, and they're expanding. And so, if there's something that's good that's come of it, I think that we're getting back to nature in many ways. And I think that certainly helped locally. passed the Volusia Forever and Echo initiatives this past November by, an overwhelming majority. So, we're definitely tapping into something, and but we need to keep that momentum moving forward, right? We can't just stall out.
Right. Well, I have a question. Other than Volusia and Orange County, are there other counties that have passed similar water protection ordinances or any kind of legislation that's come forward from the grassroots in regard to that?
Are you referring to rights of nature ordinances? Or charter?
Just water quality ordinances or similar to whether it's rights of nature or whether it's similar to the Volusia Forever and the Echo that passed here. I'm looking for kind of, I'm interested in understanding if there is a groundswell happening throughout the state.
Let me just address this, and then Clay can talk about the rest of the state. We're in contact with citizens in 30 different communities around Florida who are interested in passing a version of the right to clean water ordinance. And what they are looking at and what we've crafted is, and Kelly kind of touched on this, is a new ordinance that circumvents the preemption by not specifically granting rights to rivers, water bodies, etc., but in the whereas section saying whereas nature has rights, therefore, and then it talks about the homeocentric portion, the right to clean water. The citizens have the right to clean water, and they have the right to bring an action, to have standing in court in defense of that right. Clay?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was where the approach that I was going. And, you in that whereas clause, you can certainly set out that broad intent. Even thinking back, when the net ban is a very interesting case study, but it starts out with a provision that the marine resources of the state belong to all of us and are part of our heritage and our legacy, and we need to do the following things to protect that. I was sort of thinking about other things that have happened, and I think we're all naive if we don't understand that if we really want to clean up our waters, that it's going to cost money. We're all part of the problem. In this county, we can't point to any single polluter that's caused this. We're all part of it. So I'll mention Brevard County as an example where I think was it 2 years or 4 years? I'm losing my mind, and I'm sure Kelly knows where I left it, but she knows the answer. So I think it was 4 years ago they passed an amazing bond issue for basically providing grants for the purposes of restoration of the Indian River Lagoon. And that's attracted some additional state money as well. So that's an example. I mean, I do think we've all tapped into something here about what the voters want, something different. Mm-hmm. And in the case of land conservation, we've certainly seen them do it. But in the case of this water restoration effort in Brevard, that was an overwhelming success as well.
I don't know if this is a question, but this is another topic related, of course. We need to recognize and educate citizens of the massive influx of new residents into Florida every day. The last number I heard was 1,000 a day were coming in. While the emphasis on pollution is relevant, the potable water supply has to be brought to the forefront. Water treatment infrastructure desperately needs to be updated statewide. So that is a parallel situation. But it goes back to what you were saying about the straws. It's like all of these permits have been being issued, and how do you mitigate that?
You know, one thing, Nancy, I'd like to bring to the discussion is the cost, because that always comes up, right? What is the cost of correcting our pollution problem? And a lot of times we're focused on, for instance, in Everglades restoration, spending billions there to create stormwater retention areas and treatment areas, et cetera. When the Orange County Comptroller was tasked with the problem of determining what the financial impact of the Right to Clean Water Charter Amendment would be on Orange County, what he came up with was equipoise, that it could cost some people some money to stop polluting. But on the other hand, by giving citizens the right to bring actions on their own against pollution sources, it may actually save the county money that it would normally spend on enforcement of regulations, et cetera. So, you know, this is a, you know, kind of a radical concept of how do you stop pollution? You stop people from polluting. And I know that that may be an oversimplification, but if you go to the most egregious pollution sources and you say, you know, here's a court order, you have to clean up your act. You have to clean up your discharge before you send it into the waters of Volusia County. You know, and that applies. There are municipalities with municipal wastewater treatment facilities that are discharging into the aquifer that ends up into the waters at 8 to 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate, where the water level of impairment is 0.286. So just incredibly polluting sources into the aquifer that ends up in our streams and our springs, et cetera. So you know, this is a different way of looking at it. This is not, okay, let's raise $200 million to clean up our water. This is, let's empower people to bring actions against egregious polluters and address that end of it.
I guess the difficulty is, Chuck, that we're talking about this as being plaintiffs, but we're all the defendants. You know, we don't have a Georgia-Pacific dumping pulp material into the river in this county. What we have is the largest, we have 100,000 people on septic tanks, you know, and so that's a huge problem. Our major cities are along the coast, and most of them developed by draining the water table, pushing all their stormwater into the estuary, and then erecting water treatment or wastewater treatment plants that dumped treated effluent, but not tertiary treated effluent into the estuary. So these are huge backlogs of costs that are going to have to be dealt with. And so there are pricing issues, but that's it. What's the old pogo line? We have met the enemy, and it is us.
Yeah, and until we can say no to permits, we're going to continue to have this problem. You know, and a friend of mine worked on passing that 1/2-cent sales tax in Brevard County. Got it passed amazingly. People voted that money on them, and they're using it. Some of it they're using to retrofit people that are on septic and turn it back over to sewer. But they had 70 homes that they had transferred over to a central sewage system. And I asked my friend, I said, well, how many permits for other septic tanks did they issue during that time? And he said 700.
Right. Right.
Were they on the same type of land? Because I know
Well,
Ormond Beach has an issue where that was part of the problem, helping people get off septic there. You
Right.
had very small lots and very porous soil, but and so the argument was, well, why are you continuing to permit on the other side of the river? But the lots on the other side of the river, the soil was different, and the lots were much larger.
Right.
So was that the situation here? Not that I'm saying it's
It
up
was,
to permit.
it was different properties, but it's still, you know, in the Indian River Lagoon shed,
Mhm.
what I would call, you know, they're not like 10 miles away from the Indian River Lagoon,
Right,
you know.
right.
But,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, you're right. A lot of them that they did get off were within 50 feet or 20 feet of the lagoon.
Right,
So those were important to get off.
right.
Nancy, to that point, part of it is a disconnect, right? We have so many different agencies in the state that it is very difficult to find out which agency do you call, who has the answer. You know, up until last year, it was up to the State Department of Health to determine whether or not sewer was available, right? So it was up to the health department. And the way you determine that was if the gravity line ran right in front of your property, it was available. If it was across the street and new pipes had to go in, it was not available. And so the rules set up this crazy dynamic where, you know, people are getting large amounts of money to put people onto the central sewer system and upgrading the utility services to, Clay mentioned, the tertiary or the advanced water treatment, AWT. And right across the street, you could have people, you know, putting in brand new septic systems. And so there's this disconnect. There's a success story, which is the state legislature is moving that piece over to DEP, right? So, but, you know, all of that process has to happen for that disconnect to be connected. And I wanted to just add, someone asked, you know, who do I call if there's pollution? Well, you know, again, there's several numbers to call, all in different agencies. But if you have pollution, if you see a freshwater algal bloom, so in a river or a lake that's freshwater, you're supposed to call Florida Department of Environmental Protection at 855-305-3903. Right. And because if you call the local government, they, you know, everyone is feeding into the state right now on harmful algal blooms. But if you see a dead manatee, you're supposed to call Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at 800-636-0511. So that's for fish kills. So, you know, part of the rights of nature, the beauty of it is that it sort of, the whole philosophy is that we need to be more unified in our approach, right? We've seen the Venn diagrams of sustainability where you have interlinking circles of, you have the environment in one circle and you have the economy in another circle and you have society or quality of life in another circle. And then where they intersect, that's where you have sustainability. But I think the rights of nature movement would argue that those circles are concentric, right? The outer circle is the environment, and then you have society, and then you have the economy. I think it was Thomas Berry who said, how can you have healthy people on a sick planet, right? So it's sort of a mind shift and contacting those elected officials, right? Someone asked, how does the water management district feel about all of this? Well, the water management districts are appointed officials. The governor appoints those officials. So it's, you know, if we want to remove the preemption, any one of our local legislators could submit a bill to do that, right? So it's about working together, because I think that everyone likes clean water, right? We all want inexpensive, clean water, potable water. And if we, as a matter of law, keep moving those goalposts, we're never going to get there. And if we're not planning for it and working towards it, it's going to be very, very expensive getting clean water. Everyone's grandchildren are going to be paying for it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful if we had a way to show people how expensive their water will be if we have to go to something like desalination instead of cleaning it up before that happens. It's as language frames thinking. It's interesting to me how it used to be everything was sustainable. We're going to be sustainability, and you mentioned that. And now it's shifting to resiliency, which seems to me to be kind of a person-centric. Oh, we're going to be resilient and survive and like move our houses away from coastal flooding, et cetera, et cetera. But that's just an aside. I have one more question, I think, here. I think this is to you, Chuck. Is the Orange County Amendment 1 retroactive? If yes, how far back? Also, what if pollution was created in Seminole and traveled to the Wekiva in Orange?
Yeah, those are great questions. And the answer to the first one is no, it's not retroactive. That I think the attorneys would underscore the point that you can't pass a law making something that's already happened illegal. So it's from the date that it passed, which is November 3rd, 2020 forward. If somebody were to pollute the waters of Orange County, they could be sued by an individual in Orange County who's lived there for a year. What was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
What if pollution was created in Seminole
outside
and traveled?
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because that has come up actually. There's a utilities company called Utilities Inc. that operates a wastewater treatment facility that has overflowed since November 3rd into a tributary of the Wekiva River and entered the Wekiva River. The Wekiva River is basically half Orange, half Seminole for a good portion of the way. And we looked at bringing an action against Utilities Inc., but because the physical entity is outside of the jurisdictional boundaries of Orange County, it's, and Clay and Kelly can weigh in on this, that it's difficult to bring an action against somebody outside of the county. And this is what happened with the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. They created rights for Lake Erie, but it's outside of the city of Toledo. So therefore, it was struck down in court. So that's why we kept Orange County specifically to Orange County jurisdictional boundaries.
Okay. That is, I'm going to throw open I think those are our questions for now. And so let me throw open any remaining comments that the panel would like to make.
Kelly, would you talk about revising the program that the county used to have again?
Oh, yeah, sure. So it's a process, right? So whenever we're talking about rules or what should be, we think about what's the policy, right? What is the argument? What's the rationale for having something? And I was talking about the process, the how. So when we're contacting our elected and appointed officials, it's good to not just say, here's the problem, but to bring a solution, right? To give them a tool that they can actually apply. And so
the program that you were talking about that Volusia used to have.
Environment and Natural Resources Advisory Committee, NREC. So the way that worked, that process is that when the county council decides that they want to adopt or amend a minimum standard that applies countywide, including all of the cities, they historically have appointed an NREC board, Environment and Natural Resources Advisory Committee. and they seek representation from all the industries that would be affected, from professors, public, citizens, residents, and they try to make it as diverse as possible. And that NRAC committee typically meets for months. I came to Volusia County when the WaterWise, the irrigation ordinance, the minimum standard was being adopted. And, that took the better part of a year. The NRAC committee, you start with every possible issue. That NRAC committee narrows down the issues and then brings forward a set of recommendations that they think can be effective throughout the county and get traction, right? And so the idea is when the county council votes to adopt a minimum standard, they've done a lot of vetting, they've done a lot of listening sessions through this committee. So NREC is almost like an oversight board of minimum standards, and then they disband when the minimum standard is adopted. So they're fleeting, right? They come and go depending on what minimum standard the county council wants to work on.
Sounds like we need that again.
Mhm.
One thing, Kelly, that I in your presentation and in Clay's, the two words I keep hearing is minimum standards. Minimum standards are not going to get us to the point of clean water.
Right.
If we want to get clean water, we have to raise the standard. And that's kind of what we're doing in Orange County here with this is the standard is unpolluted water. And then when you come under that standard, when you violate that standard, then you're in violation of the law. And how it plays out, we don't know. But one thing I would like to add here is anyone who is interested, we do have a Facebook page, the Florida Rights of Nature Network page. And there's an article that just came out in Forbes magazine, which said that the rights of nature is inevitable in the United States. This is by a business consultant, and that businesses need to realize this is coming. And it cites actually the Orange County passage, and it says that for businesses, they need to start gearing towards this because it is inevitable that this right will be passed throughout the United States. So I invite you to read that article at the Florida Rights of Nature Network. And lastly, Kelly referred to, well, you could file a bill to repeal it. That bill has been filed by Ana Escamani to repeal the preemption in last year's SB 712.
This is a little bit of an aside, but it's akin to the overall concept. One of the unique provisions in the early federal laws were the private attorney general actions, where a group, could make a direct action if there was a violation of the Clean Water Act or the Endangered Species Act. One of the really interesting provisions of the Endangered Species Act is that the plaintiff in the case is not the Sierra Club or the Audubon Society, it's the critter. And the most impactful environmental lawsuit that was ever brought in this county is the case of Coretta versus Volusia County. The marine sea turtle, loggerhead sea turtle that beat the county in court and caused the development of the conservation plans. And then during my day, we got all the speed limits for manatees out on the waterway because I was basically appointed as, in effect, basically the attorney general for the benefit of the manatees to get those things done. So that it's an interesting precedent that we have that is consistent with this concept of the rights of nature.
Very good. Thank you all. That was just a fascinating discussion. And I'll just close by saying thank you all so much for all the attendees for their relevant questions. And on behalf of the Volusia Water Alliance, we'd like to thank our speakers for helping us to better understand such a crucial topic. The Volusia Water Alliance would also like to thank our sponsors and partners and let you know that this project is funded in part by a grant from the nonprofit Fish and Wildlife Foundation of Florida via proceeds from the Protect Florida Springs license plate. And I want to let you know about an upcoming event on February 23rd. The League of Women Voters, Volusia County, will host Chuck O'Neill and Jim Durocher for a hot topic, furthering the discussion about the rights of nature and the rights to clean water movement. Please join the League of Women Voters from 5:30 to 6:30 on Tuesday, February 23rd. And to sign up, please go to lwvvc.org. And once again, I'd like to thank you all so much. This has just been a wonderful discussion, and thank you for your time and expertise. Good night.